Hi everybody. Sorry, I'll just wait for the conversations to die down. That's all right. Nice to meet you all. I'm going to start with a shameless self-promotion slide. But hello, I'm Paul. I'm technical front-end lead at Zucha. Some of you may have just heard Will's talk, so we work together. I've been at Zucha for about 12 years now, and I've been working on the web quite a lot longer, since the dark days of IE6, Windows XP, and the glory days of Web 2.0. So it's fair to say I've seen some things. But today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about accessibility and why I think everyone has a role to play in ensuring that you're making your websites accessible. More specifically for content editors, how you can incorporate an inclusive mindset to help you produce lovely, accessible work without adding an already overloaded work, without adding more overhead to your already overloaded workload. Before we get stuck in, I'm going to do a little, this is the only audience participation, don't worry, but just a quick show of hands, see what kind of audience we've got here. Hands up if you're a dev in here. Cool. QA, test. Wearing a lot of hats maybe. Marketing, sales, business development. Cool. And then finally, content editors or anyone who actually produces content for the website. Okay, awesome. Well, that's a good spread. And actually, you know, it's does apply. I said it's content editors, but it does apply to everybody. So moving on to my next question. Why should I care about accessibility? I think it's fair to say some of us, all of us at some point will suffer from some form of impairment, whether it's physical, mental, permanent, temporary, or even situational. So right now you might all be fit, healthy, perfect eyesight, and it just doesn't, right now it's not applying to you. But, you know, you might break your wrist tomorrow and actually suddenly that keyboard navigation becomes a little bit more important. Or as we all get older and our eyesight tails off, maybe, you know, the color contrast, that font size, that's a bit, you know, that applies a bit more. I mean, or simply it could be that you had one too many sangrias last night and right now you were not firing on all cylinders and all you want is simple directions to the pharmacy to get some paracetamol. These are all some form of accessibility issue. But spoiler alert, it isn't just a dev problem. Often I've found it can be referred to as a technical problem, especially when you're referring to things like screen readers or keyboard functionality. A lot of people will go, oh, it's a dev problem, it's fine. But I believe it's an everyone job. I mean, we all are involved in the project process. We're all working towards the same goal. We all want to build beautiful websites everyone wants to go to. And so we all have a role in making that end product accessible. In short, we're all working for the greater good. Now, if you're in Will's talk, his gift game is much stronger than mine, but bear with me. There's one other thing that I don't like to lead with, but yeah, you kind of have to. It's the law. From next year, the European Accessibility Act comes into force, which will require all websites. So in the UK, currently, all public sector websites have to conform to the WCAG guidelines. But from next June, that will apply to all websites, public and private sector. So that is something to bear in mind. But yeah, I don't like to lead with it because it's often a bit of a club to beat people over the head with, and it's not necessarily the most productive way to get people to do what you want. But how do I know how accessible a website it is? Thankfully, we've got lots of tools, guidelines, tips, apps, plugins that help us do that. So to name a few, we've got the European Accessibility Act, which I've just mentioned, most famous Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. In the US, we've got Section 508. We've got WARIA, which is a technique you may have heard of. Plugins like Axe is another one. And my personal favorite, that just rolls off the tongue, the beautifully named EN 301549, which is, yeah, just wonderful. All of these together provide us with information on how we build our websites as accessible. They are just a set of guidelines that help us know what we're doing. And the most recognizable one of these is, as I said, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, fondly known as WCAG. So, WCAG is a set of really rather detailed guidelines on how to, and in their own words, it's demonstrating how to make web content more accessible to people with disabilities. Excuse me. And the key takeaway here is the word content. The important bit. So they are quite technical. They're not, you know, if you're suffering from a bit of insomnia, it's a nice bedtime read, but they're very detailed and they are quite technical documents, but the key point here is it's the content the goal is to make the content accessible, make that bit what we want to use. And that leads us nicely onto the main event, the practical tips for editors. So how can you, as a content editor who already has a big heavy workflow, optimize that and start thinking about accessibility from the beginning? So these are some little tips and tricks that, it's by no means an exhaustive list. They're what I like to think as quick wins that you can sort of add to your daily workflow as you're going along to think about it to help the content you're producing more accessible. They might seem basic. Some of you might be doing some of them. Some of you might be doing all of them. If so, brilliant, wonderful. You're also doing my job. Go outside and spread the good news. But hopefully some of you might find this, find something interesting to learn about today. So I'm going to kick off with, go back to my Sangria example, readability and language. Cognitive disabilities like dyslexia are really, really rather common. More common than I think we realise. In the UK, the NHS reckons that 1 in 10 people have some form of cognitive disability. So know your audience. Knowing how you're writing is key. I'm a developer and I'm guilty of speaking to everybody else as if I'm another developer. So it's quite easy for experts to talk as if they are another expert. But if you're writing to a newer audience, that's just jargon to a lot of people. So yeah, bear that in mind. If it doesn't have to be legalese, then avoid it. And a personal mantra of mine is less is more. I am guilty. My wife has said before that I can use 1,000 words when only 10 are needed, but that's something to bear in mind. Next up, we've got content structure. So a web page is a document like any other document, like this piece of paper I've got here, which doesn't have any headings, but it's the structure. HTML is the structure and the meaning of what we're doing. So when we're writing stuff, think about headings and subheadings. If you're using a screen reader, a lot of users will navigate by pulling up a list of headings on the page, so they can navigate exactly where they want. So if you are thinking purely visually, and you've got, I want a heading, so I'm going to make it bold and 20 pixels because that's my flow, and I know that's fine visually, but it means nothing to me as a screen reader user. So think about your heading levels, think about your H1s, your H2s, and avoid skipping levels as well. So keep them sequential, like a table of contents in a book. If you've got headings, you've got subheadings. If you skip, say, from an H4 to an H2 to an H4, it might look nice. But again, if I'm using a screen reader, it's like someone's ripped a big chunk, or it feels like someone's ripped a big chunk out of that document. I don't know where I am. I don't know what the context is. So, I also use it as a good way of planning out the document. I put my headings, titles, and then I know. So that can be some way of doing it. Make use of other functionality. HTML is brilliant. There's loads of really obscure elements that do things. Obviously, the obvious ones are lists, numbered lists, bullet lists, block quotes, things like that. So you try and make use of that to really infer that meaning in your documents. Moving on to everyone's favorite, abbreviations and acronyms. I couldn't resist this. Sorry, think about it from someone else's point of view. There we go. Again, we're all experts. A lot of people are experts in their field. So you use abbreviations, you use acronyms because it's easy. We don't want to say stuff. But to a layperson, that's a jumble of numbers. So if you are going to use them, just write it out first. Write it out in full. So here we've got first person view or FPV. Again, HTML has the abbreviation tag, which you add a title to, you add the full content to. So you keep that visual flow for people that know it. It's still short, but it provides a tooltip so you can hover over, you can see the full title. And again, as somebody with assistive technology, they can dive in and they can see that definition, so they fully understand it. Links. I haven't talked about alt text really, but links and alt text are probably the most common things. So, please, no more read more, no more click here. I think we probably all know it by now, but make them descriptive. Again, screen reader users, there's a variety of ways assistive users will navigate, but often it's by links, because if you're looking for something, I want to pull all the links out and I want to navigate down. So make the text descriptive. If in this example here, I've got read guidance on flying with a bike. JAWS, anything else will read that as something like link, guidance on flying with a bike. That's pretty clear. If you've just got, for guidance on flying with a bike, click here, then all I get is link, click here. I have no idea where that's going, no idea what that's doing. So it seems simple, but it's also, because it's simple, it's really, really important to bear in mind. And I'm going to touch on a little scenario, which I'm sure a few people have done it. Imagine you've got something you want to do that your website doesn't quite let you. You've got a new campaign, you want it to stand out, but we don't have a component for that yet. We don't have a layout, so you want something to be different. But the development team, they've got a big backlog. That's not going to happen in the time you need. So you're forced to bend your website to what you have. So in this scenario, you've received got certification and partner logos here that you want to showcase. So you get your image from Creative, which has got all your logos on. Brilliant. So we upload the image, and we all know we have alt text. So what do we put? The alt text, partner and certification logos. Perfect. Tick the box. It's accessible. That's exactly what it says. But again, I come to a screen reader. I've no idea what content is on that image, what that means. It's great that you've got logos, but yeah, it doesn't mean anything to me. So one way you can do it is you can, again, use the same image. You just upload it, but this time your alt text is a bit more explicit. So you can just say something like partner and certification logo, text list follows, and then print a list. Use your bulleted list, use your ordered list. Just print the text list below with your links. So therefore, you've got this equivalent experience, so people can see that. If you've got a component, if you've got an accordion component, brilliant. Collapse it so you don't have to see it. You keep your flow nice, but you're providing that information easily to people that can't see the image. And you may have guessed this is from our website, but option 3, if you have the component, which I would like to say is the best way, obviously, because it's our site, just upload each image separately. Each image has its own alt tag. So you've got the context there. Now you've got your list, but it's all in one thing. So that's the perfect scenario. They're both together. Everyone's happy. And I've just gone back. Yeah. So just a couple more tips. This is a contentious one. I know anyone who's written content or has history has probably got several thousand PDFs lying around on their server. So yeah, I know it's easy to say, but if you are, try not to use them unless you know that they are being made with accessibility in mind. Ideally, make them a web page. It's a document. Make another web page, link to it. That's fine. Have a chat with your dev team if you still want that offline thing. So you've got print styles, so you can still have that look and feel like a PDF if people want an offline version, but try and keep it on the web. Treat embeds like maps with care. They're not always accessible, but crucially, they're not your code. They're not in your house. You don't know what's going to happen. You have no control. You can't fix any issues. So if you have to use them, by all means do. Make sure you provide an alternative explanation or text directions, just the address or something like that. Yeah, and then you're not alone. Lean on the tools to help you. So how can Drupal help you? I'm only going to touch on a few tools here. There's lots more. There's one that I saw in a talk yesterday, which I didn't have time to squeeze in. But these are sort of more overall tools that can help as part of your job. Again, some of you may know them or use them. Site Improve is probably the big main one. It's a separate platform. You feed it your sitemap, and it will go along and it will scan the whole of your site. You can set it to do it regularly. It'll run scans, it'll provide feedback, it'll provide reports on both the technical WCAG guidelines, but there's also some best practice checks. Now, it's worth putting my developer hat on again and saying that the automated tests are great, but don't rely on them solely. They typically will cover 20-30% of fixes. So this is not a replacement for proper manual accessibility testing, but it does help you understand how your content and identify issues. It integrates well with Drupal. There's a plugin. I think this is actually the Chrome plugin example up on the screen, but it's a very similar experience. And there's a thing called a pre-publish check as part of that. So you can, on unpublished, on draft content, you can see what your content is and what any issues are before you go live and before you have to fix them. But it is a paid-for subscription, so that is always something to bear in mind, and it's per page. So if you've got lots of pages, it can rack up a little. Next, we have Monsido, which is very similar thing. It's owned by Acquia, so the Drupal integration and the support there is really strong, which is good. You get a lovely, pretty dashboard view. Again, it integrates brilliantly with Drupal. You get this dashboard. You can see trends over time and identify all of these issues as well. Again, it's paid for. Don't ask me how much it is because I don't know. I've tried to find out, but it's I think again it's a per page thing. But next is maybe a bit different, and I'm sure probably a lot of people have seen this before. This is an open source Drupal module called Editorially, and this runs within Drupal. So when I click save, it'll run a set of scans on the page, and then in your draft page there at that point, it'll show all of the issues. Again, this is an example of it's highlighted an issue, and it's giving you an explanation of what the issue is, why you should use it, or why it's important, and maybe some tips on how to fix it. You can also, the things it highlights are much more focused on content, but it is... Sorry, I've lost my train there. You can filter these issues by the user and the role, so it will highlight technical issues. If you don't care about, or you're not able to fix the contrast issues in your navigation menu, you can filter the types of issues by your user role, so you're only seeing the information you need to, so you're not being overwhelmed with all of these problems. And then I think I'm conscious of time, but just for the last couple of minutes, and obviously, it wouldn't be a talk, this thing, without talking about the belle of the ball, Starshot, or rather Drupal CMS. One of the core tracks in Starshot is accessibility tooling, and the focus there is assessing the current state of accessibility, evaluating what tools are available and what tools should be provided, and then what should be enabled by default, if any. Should it all be enabled? Is that overwhelming for people? Or, what is there? So, we need your help. So if anyone's got any ideas or thoughts about that, there are lots of ways you can contribute. If you've got thoughts, you can either come and talk to me. My colleague Gareth over there is accessibility track lead for Starshot, so please come and bug him. Or as I say, you've got the Slack channel, that link up there, and the accessibility team, if you're interested in the technical side, run regular meetups throughout the year. And that is the contribution schedule, which you've probably seen hundreds of times this week. Well, that's it. Thank you very much. They were not quick.
Thank you very much. That was great. What was the name of the first tool that you had up that I didn't get to write down? It was
Site Improve.
Oh, great. Thank you.
The other one, just for anyone else, is Headings Map. It's a Chrome plugin. You click on it and it just shows in the sidebar your heading structure, which goes back to my point earlier. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, yeah. And my main question was about, the read more kind of links.
Yeah.
So if I have like a truncated bit of text and my ellipsis,
Yeah.
I've already got the title above it. So do I have the full title again underneath? Read more of blah, blah, blah.
That is an excellent question.
Yeah.
No, yes and no. If it's a link, is it a link or is it a button? Sorry,
It's a link. It's usually a link to the full article.
Sorry, it's a link to the full article, not an expanded thing. So,
Yeah.
A common technique, I might let Gareth chip in a second, but the way I would probably do it is, still have it as read more if you want, but you can add text that's only visible to the screen reader. So yes, repeat the thing. So you can say read more about flying with a bike or something like that.
Yeah.
It's important to understand how screen readers actually browse.
Yeah.
They don't do it the same way that
Yeah.
visual persons will, because they might do that header thing and use that to navigate through the page. They will often take links straight out of context. They'll get a list of all the links on this page, so you might actually end up browsing the site and just getting read more.
Yeah.
And out of context, you have no clue. So while it might look like your title, where you've got a big description of what the link is, the link itself might not necessarily be read in context with that.
Yeah.
It's important to, if you want to read more, just because it fits nicely on a card, have a span with hidden text, visually hidden, inside it with the full description. Read more about
Yeah.
and then that bit's hidden. Nobody sees it.
Brilliant.
But the link itself is then
that probably couples with the other thing I was going to ask about hidden H1s and whether they were okay, but that sounds like yes. Yeah.
Time for one more.
Hiya, thank you for that. It's a very interesting presentation. I just wanted to add to that list of the automated accessibility checkers. I've been recommended one called Purple Alley, and it's very interesting. I've used it a couple of times. I can't necessarily say I'm going to go out and overly recommend it, but do play with it. The reason I'm mentioning it is because it's open source, and I find that quite an interesting direction of travel. So even though people might experiment with it just now, maybe they may have different opinions about it. I've spoken to a couple of people, it's a bit varied, but the fact it's an open source project, it seems well backed. I think the Singapore government are backing it. So I think I'm right in saying that. So it's worth keeping an eye on that Purple Alley projects going forward. That'd be quite interesting. By the way, anybody in the room, if you sometimes struggle with accessibility, here's the tip, just as I think Gareth said. For a week, put some time aside and use a screen reader. Like, just put some time aside when you have some spare time. If you've got a Mac, you're lucky, you've got VoiceOver, just play with it. Just spend a little bit of time and I really understood a lot more by using a screen reader to really understand sometimes the issues that people face with accessibility. And just by doing that, it really hammers home the issues and really makes you aware of how it affects your practice. So,
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that. Yeah, I haven't heard that, but I want to look up this afternoon.
Hi, thank you. Nice presentation. This is becoming a law now, being mandatory for all sites. Do you think you can become 100% accessible?
No. I think the problem with accessibility is it's very it's quite subjective. So I think you can get to a baseline, and particularly at AA, maybe yes, but once you get if you're looking specifically at WCAG, and obviously the hook on my talk was it's beyond the WCAG guidelines. A lot of it is intrinsically based on usability as well, and it's quite a grey area. So I don't think there's anybody who would, with 100% confidence, put their money behind and stamp and say this is accessible with a capital A. But I think you can get very far, and I think the point is as well, it's always moving. It's never. You might be accessible one day, somebody might publish some content the next day, or Chrome might update something the next day. So I think you're always chasing the tail, but it's a lofty goal, and if anyone can, then show me. But I think it's one of those you're always there's always room for improvement.
This would require a tremendous effort, especially in big corporations where you have hundreds of websites and thousands of editors.
Yeah, it is a tough one, and I think particularly with the EAA, there is a sort of the AA minimum compliance is, so it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be what you should, and you should want to aim for accessibility, but I think the law is set to the lowest common denominator, the bare minimum that we should be aiming for. Mm. Yeah.
The public sector in Europe is real, and European Accessibility Act is required to many sectors. The financial sector is coming, so the word is get ready.
Yeah. Anyone who's seen a Cabinet Office accessibility report, which we have, they're thorough. Yeah.
I'm getting the nod. I
Okay,
think
sorry.
time's pretty much done, but I think discussion obviously can carry on.
Yeah. Grab me afterwards if you want to carry on. But thank you, everyone.